Help support this channel and get early access to videos, plus exclusive content and patrons-only live discussions by becoming a member at patreon.com/BrucePoinsett.
Today's Thursday, so 2 days ago, last Tuesday, we brought a performance of Walking Through Portland with a Panther, The Life of Mr. Kent Ford, All Power, to Grant High School. And it was a free performance for Grant High School. And I'm still so high from that. I'm like so proud because it represents, and now we're embarking next week. We have a performance at Lewis and Clark. The following week, a performance at Reed. The following week, we get to go and stay in a hotel because we're bringing it to Walla Walla, to Whitman College. And then a few weeks after that, Lake Oswego show up for racial justice, which you helped broker that deal. So thank you. So looking at that, we'll like backtrack all the way from its genesis and origin. So 4 years ago, Don Wilson Glenn, the playwright, who is a longtime collaborator of mine, right? So first there's like the value, or like you can't put a price tag on that, but like the value, we were in New York City together for two decades, and at least, well, I think we were working together for at least over a decade. And he had one theater company and I had a very different kind of theater company, but we would help each other like navigate, figure out things, how to write proposals, how to write a press release, we would volunteer to run each other's box office, my company and his company, et cetera, et cetera. And just have someone else to talk to about, like, am I crazy? Is this wrong? Or is this right? Or how do I manage this thing, right? Which we're not being paid to do. I mean, this is all passion work, right? So myself, Don Wilson Glenn, the actor and artistic director of Confrontation Theater, LaTevin Alexander, who's an amazing performer. If you've seen him in Walking Through Portland with a Panther, and just he's in a show right now at the Playhouse, always performing. The three of us were taking Mr. Ford's walking tour. And we had all taken it individually before, but the three of us were all together that afternoon. And we were talking together as we were walking from one location to another. And LaTevin said, we should do a play about Mr. Ford. And I should play Mr. Ford. And I looked at Don and I was like, that is a brilliant idea. So that is how that even was like, how that started. But because we had working relationships, there was a trust that was already there, right? So we weren't pulled from a call board, right? And I will also say, I mean, it's kind of a nepotism thing, but it's also, there's going to be so much unknown that I'd rather start with some things that are relatively known. And I would rather continue with as much known as I can, because there's going to be so much unknown, right? So after some more conversations, Don and I were already working on another play together. So we got that one up. But in the meantime, he was beginning to do some research and beginning to have some interviews with Mr. Ford. And then he really started in earnest doing some drafts of the script. And then you ask about how do you get people interested? And so, well, first you have to get your creative team interested, right? Because if there isn't an excitement and buy-in and trust and embarkment, right? Because even to meet and talk, we're not paid to just meet each other and talk, right? And that's so much of what we need to do. It's not like, I have to interview for a job. It's like you're always having these conversations and interviews and dreaming about how it could be. And like I feel you need to be going to see other people's work, to see what's happening and who's doing what and who's talking about what. So you can be like, oh, who's the right person? Not about like their skill set. We're just starting with the assumption that people know how to do what they're doing, but like who's vibrationally, gonna really get into this thing with me. So, I mean, happily here in Portland, I've had some time to begin to know some grant makers. And we have here in Portland the Regional Arts and Culture Council, who they are incredible. And the resources that they offer to artists of all kinds of discipline and educators is really phenomenal. And there are other amazing grant makers too, but the Regional Arts and Culture Council helps connect artists in so many different ways and support them. So I'm always give them a shout out. So also then of course having the buy-in of Mr. Ford and having
Right.
the like opportunity to participate, like, you know, to collaborate with him from the beginning on this. But, you know, Mr. Ford is not a theater maker. So there's like, a bit of a, you know, and I know, and to write a play is really hard. And to write a play about an actual person who exists in history has another layer. And then to write an original play about a person who is known and is in the room is
Right.
another layer, right? So that even happened is amazing, and that funders saw the value of having this happen now while Mr. Ford can be in the room, right? Then to get it produced, right? To get it actually on its feet and in the theater and have people come. And part of that, I've kind of always joked, like it's kind of like being a little bit of a drug dealer. So you invite them like to the first just table read. There's not going to be a bunch of production values, but like so people can kind of just like be like, oh, I kind of know what that is. And it's free, right? You just come in, you see it, it's free. Then the next version, you know, maybe a staged reading of it. We let you in on the process so that you can have some buy-in so that you can see what happened from that just reading the paper and someone's reading the stage directions to just a little bit of the bells and whistles. Maybe, you know, there are a couple of projections if that's called for, or some sound cues, right? A little bit of movement happening. So you know, and maybe that costs a little bit of money, but you try to get, you also have to be strategic in knowing like who are the people who will talk about this to the other people. Make sure that they get in, make sure that they can see it so that they can also be part of the conversation. So that then by the time, let's say there's the third version where you're actually getting it fully produced, the people have heard of it because it's a new thing. Like you're just going to say, walking through Portland with a Panther next Tuesday at 7. What is that? I don't know. You know, so that there is some buzz, right? And making sure that, of course, Laura Laforti, who does our social media, is a wizard at that. So getting engagement and buy-in by having an organization that can help support and amplify that. Like there's no way as an individual I can do that, even though I create the press release, send it out, have relationships with local media places so that there can be in the listings, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a whole thing, right? So we have the production, it exists, and we made it knowing that we wanted it to be able to travel. So it was being made as a solo show. That's easier. You have one actor instead of the schedules of multiple ones, to create a set that was easy to break down and move from one place to another and travel. And then that the number of technical lighting cues and things like that would be minimal, right? It's it's often known as a trunk show, the idea that the whole show can go in a trunk or two and go on the road. So we made the show with that idea in mind. Then comes being able to make the relationships to get it into the spaces and to get a play into Portland Public Schools is no small bar, to jump through. Happily for this production, I received a Creative Heights grant through the Oregon Community Foundation that paid for that performance to be brought to Grant High School. But then Grant has to do, there's all the work and the things of saying, yes, it's going to be cool. And yes, we'll get our students there. And, educators are overwhelmed by how much they have to do in their day-to-day. So to set this up, I also want to say thanks to Grant High School and my friend and collaborator, Lynn Yarn, who is a teacher at Grant and who really set this whole thing in motion. So yeah, those are just like the steps. It's hard to write a play, original play. It's hard to write a play about someone who is known in history. It's hard to write a new play about someone who's known in history with them as a participant. It's hard to get all the production values up and get it on its feet so that you can see that it works and you can try it. It's hard to then make the connections and figure out all the logistics and get it out onto the road. So I am I'm still high just knowing that, like, look, we made this happen in 4 years. It is happening. And I'm really, and Mr. Ford, I think he really appreciates and is pleased. I mean, that's the most important thing, right? That he travels with the productions of it and has conversation afterwards with the audience. So the real Mr. Ford, after you've seen Tevin play it, he's there in the room. And so that's really, you know, to have that. And then I'm working with Michael Bernard Stevenson Jr., who is a local artist and educator, and making curriculum or conversation materials that actually can get used. That's the hardest part. And how do we make them in such a way so that they are available to educators in a way that educators need them to be, that have some kind of impact for the students and the students or communities, even if it's not in a educational group. But if we take it like to Westminster Presbyterian, well, what kind of materials can we have that they then can continue this conversation and decide ways to take action of whatever that might look like, to have our culture be more inclusive and to not forget the history that Mr. Ford's legacy comes from, so that we can move forward.